Well, ladies and gentlemen, we did have some big news the past few days here with the holidays and Christmas, and I'm just going to give a quick recap of kind of what's going on right now. We've got some realignment stuff, we've got some other stuff with FSU. Just completely, their team is decimated right now. Everyone's opting out. It doesn't surprise me. But how about this? 3 ACC schools expected to leave as a college football insider predicts FSU will break free with only a $100 million paycheck. FSU right now suing the ACC. Listen, when it comes to legal jargon, I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert, but it does seem kind of weak. They're suing. They're like, oh, you're a bad conference. You didn't help us out. The only thing I can think FSU has a point on is possibly them saying, listen, you diluted us by adding 3 new teams when we specifically said us, Clemson, and North Carolina voted against adding 3 new teams. It diluted our value when we're already getting screwed in this deal. That's really the only scenario where I could see FSU having an argument. Now, maybe there's some other legal stuff. This is in Florida court. They could be very favorable towards FSU and giving them a very favorable potential exit fee or deal to get them out of the conference, maybe like Maryland with the ACC, but that was a completely different situation. Either way, this is a little Christmas Eve present, a scenario that very well may occur. FSU works their way out of the ACC for less than $100 million, opening the door for 3 more to follow before the end of 2025. It's believed that Clemson and North Carolina are among the other programs, and then possibly one of the Virginia schools as well. Now, there's a lot to digest with this. The first thing I'll say, I've said from the beginning when it comes to ACC realignment, I don't think this is a Pac-12 situation because the ACC does seem to be proactive. They've already added 3 schools, and when you look at the lower tier schools in the ACC, where is Boston College really going to go? Where are some of these lower tier teams in the conference going to go? They've got no place to go other than the ACC or a worse mid-major, kind of like Washington State and Oregon State. So I think there's enough bottom feeder ACC teams that's going to keep this conference together. Also, when you combine the additions of Cal, Stanford, SMU, possibly also, there's another alternate thing that I've been kind of thinking about. What about Washington State and Oregon State? If this seriously happens, which, let's be honest, it's going to happen. The FSU is they're going to rile it up. They're going to do whatever they can to get out of this conference. They're just not making enough money. It is what it is. I know a lot of ACC people are kind of doing the same thing that Pac-12 people did a year ago, where it's like they can't leave. The grant of rights is ironclad. Let's understand something. This day and age, I do think all of this like realignment stuff, it's not going to matter in 3 or 4 years because there will be a major shift in the way college football is done, and it's probably going to completely change anyways, but at least for the next 3 or 4 years, I do think the ACC is going to lose significant teams, possibly their 4 best teams, while adding in Washington State and Oregon State to really shore up a West Wing. Again, to me, it's all anecdotal. I don't think it matters in the long run. By 2030, the sport is going to be run completely different just because none of this is healthy at all. This is not a healthy ecosystem we're dealing with where FSU is signed into a contract through 2036 and we're coming up on 2024 and they're already trying to break out of it, and they're suing their own conference to break out of a TV deal that they signed because it was extended by the ACC commissioner, and they don't think the ACC commissioner has done a good job of marketing the ACC, and also they got diluted with the additions of the 3 teams, the 2 Pac-12 schools, and SMU, although you can argue those teams aren't going to be making the full value, the full TV membership for a while, but either way, you do have to argue something, and we will see what happens when it comes to possibly FSU. Also, I would say North Carolina, Clemson, and maybe NC State or Virginia being the 4 schools to try and get out of this conference. I still think the SEC is by far the best fit for FSU and Clemson because the SEC wants to stay in their own footprint. Right now, though, the narrative is no. The SEC is saying we're done. We don't want to dilute ourselves anymore. The Big Ten is also kind of on that area, but there has been more rumors regarding the Big Ten adding FSU and Clemson than the SEC. That can all change in a matter of hours or whatever. Somebody comes out with a story, and I'm sure over the summer this is all going to be hashed out. It's all going to be crazy, and FSU undoubtedly will make their way out of this conference. It's just the reality of the situation. There's no way they're staying here through 2036 with this terrible deal. They will cause enough of an uproar. There's going to be another team that joins them in the conference. They will pay some type of exit fee, I'm sure. I mean, look at Texas and Oklahoma paying an exit fee for just leaving 1 year early, so they're going to have to pay up. But legally, they're trying to get it as low as possible, similar to what Maryland did with the ACC. And we've also got this stuff. Florida State will now be without their starting QB. Well, we already knew that. Their backup quarterback is in the transfer portal, so it looks like Brock Glenn is going to start, the third stringer. Their top running back, Trey Benson. Their two top receivers, Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman. Their star tight end, and also Jared Verse, and also their best linebacker. I think their linebacker transferred to Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. And this is just, I'm just going crazy with the spread in this Georgia versus Florida State game. When it was minus 14, Georgia was minus 14, I was like, this has got to be the easiest bet of my lifetime. Georgia should be 31-point favorites in this game. That was before FSU's backup quarterback entered the portal. And now the spread is still only minus 16.5. What am I missing? I understand Georgia's had a lot of transfers, but Carson Beck's going to play. Their running backs are going to play. Brock Bowers is probably not going to play in this game. But who really knows? It's just, like, the spread is just crazy to me. This game is going to be 42-7, and that's if Georgia wants to be nice. This is not going to be close. I cannot believe the spread is where it is. If I was honestly making this spread, I don't want to go off on a tangent about a spread, but it's crazy to me. This should be a 28-point spread. I'm not even kidding. Like, Georgia should be 28, maybe 31-point favorites over FSU right now with who is playing on FSU. It's just a crazy spread to me. We saw how bad FSU was with Brock Glenn, even their backup. It's just crazy. We'll see. And now the other angle I want to talk about, FSU is going to argue, and they can kind of argue this, to be honest, because they've completely given up on this game. I mean, there's no way we can really judge FSU. They've lost every player, but now FSU can kind of argue for eternity that we should have made the playoff. You know, us losing to Georgia doesn't matter because we didn't care about that game and we were protesting. That's the narrative the FSU fan is going to take, and at this point, it is what it is. I mean, there's really nothing you can say. When Georgia beats FSU, it's not like you can say, well, this proves that FSU shouldn't be in the playoff, because they just, all of their players are out. They're all out. It's like they're starting their second string. And then when it comes to some other games, I just wanted to talk about some of these other games. The bowl season, you know, the 12-team playoff has got to come here, man. I mean, these bowl games are just, they're brutal, but we do have, I was in on Air Force winning that game against James Madison as 3-point underdogs. You always want to pick the Service Academy when it comes to the bowl games because triple options are terrible to deal with. How about that South Alabama game? Oh my God. You got to feel bad for the MAC. You really do. What an annihilation. At one point, I forget the stat. I think South Alabama had more points than Eastern Michigan had yards. Both of those teams were 6-6. But South Alabama destroys them. Northwestern beating Utah. Guys, Utah was always a fraud, just like I said. How about Northwestern? What a season that they had. When they finish 8-5, beat Utah. But Utah should be really good next year. Yeah, Utah's a darling next year because of the Big 12 being a very watered-down conference. They're returning Cam Rising. We'll see. And then San Jose State losing was a surprise to me, certainly, with Coastal Carolina without Grayson McCall there. In terms of that game, we've also got Walter Nolan. This is crazy what Ole Miss is doing. This is the third, I'll tell you, this is the only 5-star in the portal that's actually ranked a 5-star right now in the portal, and he has transferred the big defensive tackle to Ole Miss. They've also got 2 other solid 4-star transfer portal edge rushers. Ole Miss is really going for broke next year. They're investing all of their NIL money. This is like Texas A&M from 2022, but in the transfer portal. Ole Miss is doing some crazy stuff. They've got Jackson Dart returning. We will see what they end up doing next year, but I'm sure they're going to be pretty highly ranked, at least in the preseason. They are adding a ton via the portal. They would be the number 1 biggest winner right now if I did rankings on that. And then this Jim Harbaugh situation is just a complete mess. Now, we'll see what happens to Michigan. They're facing Alabama. I think they're going to lose, but they're 2-point favorites right now. Harbaugh and Michigan could have come to an agreement a year ago. Jim and Michigan could have come to an agreement before the season. So they're basically saying, oh, Michigan's offering this contract. Harbaugh hasn't accepted it. Why would he accept it now? I think the whole situation is very strange. We don't know how long Harbaugh is going to be suspended next year. And I feel like with Harbaugh to the NFL rumors, we've heard recently, I mean, last week I heard possibly the Chargers, but now it looks like the Chargers are going in a different direction. I don't know. With the Harbaugh to the NFL stuff, it's like, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me three times, fool me four. I mean, it's every year Harbaugh is going to go to the NFL, and it never happens. So at this point, I'm not expecting Harbaugh to go to the NFL. Just because there's these rumors every single year, and the contract that Michigan offered him was very strange. It was like, oh, it's like a 10-year extension, and you have to agree you're not going to go to the NFL in 2024. So that's what the contract is. So he has to agree 1 year he's not going to go to the NFL. It's just a very strange contract. We'll have to see what happens to Michigan in terms of, the cheating stuff, and I'm sure the NCAA is going to fast track that. Everyone's like, oh, the NCAA is not going to have a ruling on that to 2026. That's not how something like that works. When you have a major scandal like this, the NCAA, they owe it to college football to act quickly and not allow Michigan to hide from punishment. I don't know what that punishment is going to be, but we should get some type of punishment this offseason, in my opinion, although the NCAA does work very slowly. Either way, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.